This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. My name is Neil Saravanamutu. Today is Monday, the 12th of May. We are here to talk about the last week in Ottawa City politics. As always, I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Hello to you both.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Neil, Joanne.
So today is Monday. Yesterday was Sunday, Mother's Day, and also the Tulip Festival here in Ottawa. Did either of you make it down there?
Well, I went to the Tulip Festival, not really the festival, but I went training for the 10K run. In my case, I'm making air quotes because I don't know if the verb I would use is run. But with my friend, we went through the tulips, Dow's Lake. Beautiful. People should get out there. I had a great Mother's Day. Sadly, did not spend it with my offspring, but I did spend it with my actual mom for the first time in a long time, which is why I'm here in lovely Toronto in their kitchen. So, and why we're doing this online version of the podcast. So thanks everyone for accommodating me as usual.
How about you, John?
Yeah, no, we didn't get down to the Tulip Festival. We got some pretty good intel saying it was busy down there yesterday. But we had a good day. I'll be able to see my mom this weekend when I go down to Southern Ontario for the long weekend. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, the weekday is the time to see the tulips.
Well, actually, Joanne, on that note, I was down there on the weekend and it was absolutely jam-packed. John, you're right. But I had to go out this afternoon past Dow's Lake. And so I was cycling past there and I thought, there are so many people here on a Monday. I thought, is today a public holiday? And if so, why am I working?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, the people come to see the tulips every day from all over. So that's a great thing. I'm so happy to see that people do that stuff.
Yeah.
They never get old, the tulips.
I love that festival because you just get so many people there and such a diverse representation of Ottawa too.
A lot of family photos being taken.
Yeah. Okay. Let's jump in. Our first topic is the Osgoode by-election. And the reason we're talking about it this week, this election takes place in June, but there was an all-candidates debate that took place in Carlsbad Springs last week. Now, I was there, and I think you guys had the chance to watch it on YouTube. So, Joanne, maybe you can get us started. There were 11 candidates. Were there any candidates that really stood out for you?
Yeah, I would say there are 11 registered candidates. I believe only 10 made it to the debate, which is actually kind of amazing, I think. There are some candidates for sure whose names will be a little bit more recognized outside of Osgoode ward itself. I think we will all, those of us who watch City Hall will remember Doug Thompson. He was a councillor for many years. He was also, even in pre-amalgamation Ottawa, he was the mayor of the township at the time. So a name that a lot of people know well. He backed George Derues when George ran, and then he seemed to regret it and ran against him the last time around and lost. And so he's running yet again this time. There's a couple I would say community folks who maybe are a little bit more well known, and I would say their campaigns are, I don't want to say more sophisticated, but certainly more fulsome. They got the full thing going. So, for example, Elizabeth Skalski, she's been the community association president. Isabel, I suppose. What did I say?
Elizabeth.
My apologies, Isabel. I do that all the time. Isabel is, for 3 years, she's been the president of the Greeley Community Association, has done a lot in the community. Also, Colette Lacroix-Veltius, she is a businesswoman at IBM, but also is part of a family farm that raised some really delicious Wagyu beef, I just have to say. And so she's very well known and running a big campaign there. I also would say that I spoke with Jennifer Van Connet, and I want to just say for transparency, we chatted about Taywin. She called me to ask some background on it. I was happy to talk to her. And she is from Carlsbad Springs, where this debate took place. And she stood out for her, I would say, she was the most against the new Taywin project. I know we're going to talk about that soon. And on the other side, I thought Bobby Galati also stuck out because he was the most in favor of Taywin. So there's a wide range array of issues, but and a lot of candidates to keep track of. So it's not easy.
Okay. So John, maybe you can just take us through what are the expected issues. So, Osgoode is one of the 3 rural wards in the city of Ottawa. We've mentioned Taywin, but maybe you can just remind everyone what that is, why it's and why it's of interest to this election.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say, just jumping off what Joanne mentions, it's hard to sometimes predict municipal elections because no one's out there polling, right? The by-election for Osgoode wards. So I remember covering municipal elections in some wards. You just don't really know the names. You try to do as much research as possible, but really you don't know where the votes are going to land on election day. And so we're going to talk about Taywin now, which is probably the biggest issue, biggest long-term issue, certainly for the ward. And it was a decision made by the last city council to create this new community, what they call a satellite community, near Carlsbad Springs. At full build-out, we're talking something like 40,000 homes. It's a development between Taggart and the Algonquins of Ontario to build this new community. It was super controversial last term of council because of how far it is away from the suburban and urban part of Ottawa. So that means bringing out servicing and thinking about pipes and also transportation, transit options. So super controversial for not just the ward, but also the city writ large, because you don't know how much this is really going to cost in the long run. Yeah. And so for candidates running in this by-election, and we heard it manifest through the all candidates meeting, this is a big issue about whether, if you're the next city councilor coming in, you should support this new development in your ward, or is this something you could push against?
Okay, well, let me turn this to either of you. So if I were a voter in Osgoode and that issue of Taywin was important to me, what do we know about where any of those candidates stand on the issue of Taywin?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you have Jennifer Van Connet. Sorry, I have to keep looking at her, and I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. I apologize, Jennifer, if I'm not. She is from Carlsbad Springs, and I think it is a giant ward, by the way. There's 8 community associations, many, many towns or centers, Carlsbad Springs, Greeley, Metcalfe, Vars, Osgoode Village, and each of those areas are quite unique, and I think people feel that they have common issues, but they also have unique issues. Carlsbad Spring cares the most about Taywin. It is literally in their backyard. A lot of people are not in favor of it. You'll remember there was a controversial story covered by my old friend Kate Porter about them clear cutting trees in the middle of the night, claiming they were going to have a farm. I don't know if that farm has ever been started actually on Taywin. And so Jennifer was very much out to say she does not think it is a great idea. She would like to stop it, and has said that she would vote in favor of Bay Ward Teresa Kavanaugh's motion to remove Taywin from the official plan, which is, I think we've talked about here before, its own controversial thing. A number of folks said that they did not have enough information, and that included Doug Thompson said he'd like a big review to say, okay, exactly what do we know here about this? Because I have a lot of questions. And other people, I think, including Isabelle Skalski and Colette Lacroix-Veltius, they said they're generally in favor of it. Maybe not as much as Bobby Glady, who's, says, yeah, let's go on. But a lot of them said, they promised to make sure that the community was getting a lot of information and that it was more clear. And because it's such a big deal and such a big ward, I think this happens lots of places. Like a la Lansdowne, the closer you are to it, the more you're paying attention and the more you are concerned about it. And the farther you are from it, maybe the less you're concerned about, does this affect me and my day-to-day life as much, right? And so you might not be. And so I think that is kind of where they stood.
Okay. We mentioned there were 11 candidates and 10 of them showed up. John, I want to ask you, we want to encourage the democratic process as much as possible, but during that debate, there was one candidate who really stood out for grandstanding, was from outside the ward, didn't appear to have any great aspiration to actually represent the ward, just wanted to make his points about his particular topic. And so what do we do about candidates like this that are a bit, disruptive, disrespectful even?
I think the voters will ultimately decide at the end of the day. Look, anyone can run for government. We saw this in the recent federal election campaign in Carleton riding with a ballot of 90 some odd candidates. I truly think the voters going to decide and choose the best person for the job. And so, yeah, you're going to, and especially in municipal politics too, by the way, you get a lot of interesting characters who run for office. My God, Joanne
like
and I,
mayor.
Yeah, we could talk about some mayoral debates that we've seen in our time covering City Hall. But that's the double edge of democracy, right?
Yeah.
And it can be entertaining at times too. That's a bright side. But look, and I do think that people at the end of the day will go to the ballot box and choose who the best person is for the job.
But if I can jump in here, which is harder.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Which is harder when we're not in person. It's harder for me to interrupt Jon when we're not sitting side by side, which is good for Jon, I guess. But I do actually think that democracy is not completely well served when anybody can run. And those mayoral debates were exactly like an excellent point, right? You would have I remember once it was one election, it was clear that Jim Watson and Clive Doucette were the only serious contenders for mayor. I'm sorry. I get to say this openly now that I'm not a journalist. And I'm not saying that other people shouldn't have the right to do that. But I also know that Jim Watson refused to debate only Clive Doucette because he said, well, I'm only going to go to the debates where everybody is invited. And of course, it turns out to not be a debate, and it's great for the front runner, right? So I don't think that's great. You're hearing from a lot of people who are not serious, wasting a lot of people's time. So what do? I mean, I do think that there should be a way that I don't want to create undue barriers, especially financial barriers for people to run. But I think there should be ways to weed out the least serious people or the people not willing to make any effort. So for example, we finally have a thing where you have to sign up. You have to get nomination. You have to get people to sign your nomination sheets. Well, it's 25 people. Maybe it could be 100 people or 200 people, and make sure it's maybe people from that ward, right? I don't know. I just think it could be just a little bit more challenging to sign up so that people who are really not in it for serious reasons, perhaps they would be dissuaded. Jon, counterpoint.
Jon, I would just say I agree with that, but I also say it puts a little bit of pressure on these all candidates meetings and debates for the moderators in particular. So if you really want to have a meaty debate and a conversation about the issues at hand, a lot of that work falls on the moderator to make sure they get that interaction between the candidates. It's not something that's not a burden really you want to put on the process of a debate or the moderator, but sometimes if you're going to have a candidate who doesn't really want to talk about the big issues that people care about in the ward, sometimes it takes that referee to step in and say, hey, here are the things that we want to hear about, and here's the things we want to talk about during this debate.
And it's so hard for people who are community folks. And I really want to give a shout out to CJRO 107.7 FM for actually having that debate, putting it online. You can hear it now, 2 hours. So that is a great public service. So that's fantastic for them. And I know this from being at CBC, how people complain bitterly if they don't think you're treating them properly. So you do have to kind of invite everyone. It's a kind of a schmaltzel. And so I can understand why people who are moderating these debates kind of don't want to get involved in the issues. I used to fact check the mayoral ones. That used to make me crazy because I couldn't stand it. But still, it's tricky.
Yeah. Okay. And that by-election takes place in mid-June. And so we will have results then. Let's move on to the second. Go ahead.
I just want to say one last thing. You should listen to that debate, but if you missed it in person, there are 4 other meet and greets in the ward. So it is hard to figure out who to vote for when there's 11 people running. Some of them don't even have websites. And some don't live in the ward, which I think, okay. But there are, go online and you'll see there's plenty of time to meet them. And, you have 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So I encourage people to do that. There's lots of ways to get it informed.
Yeah, good point. Because it's very difficult both for voters to learn about their candidates, but also for candidates to get through to the voters. So absolutely take advantage of those opportunities if you are in Osgoode and are planning to vote. Let's move on to item number 2, which is last week in the news, we heard about a local developer who got handed a $500 water bill for a property that he bought in 2017. So this is $500 for arrears from the previous owner. So Jon, is buying a house, I would have assumed this is at least as sophisticated as buying a used car, where that the government is taking care of any outstanding tickets and whatnot. But is this not the case with a house?
Well, you'd think that once you buy the house, you start with a clean bill and only your mortgage and your own water bills you take care of. But I feel for this guy, holy cow! And I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're just going off of the CBC reporting here, just for transparency. So I mean, as quick context and background, this gentleman took over bought a home in Hintonburg, found out that the previous owner owed some dough from the water bill, and it was passed off to him by the city, and the city says he has to, in fact, pay it. The previous homeowner has died, and so that person's not around to pay that bill. So according to the city, it falls to the new property owner to pay that bill, which actually blew my mind as well. I don't think I covered a story like this when I was covering City Hall, so this is all new to me. This was what drives me crazy about the story, is that according to the reporting, when the current homeowner asked for information about the water bill that he's owing, that he needs to pay from the previous owner, the city told him to file an FOI request because they wouldn't give him the breakdown from the principal and the interest. File an FOI
but they want him
request.
to pay for it.
You gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, man. Like, I think this is something where the city councilor needs to maybe help out and get some information, because I don't think it's fair for this homeowner.
Yeah. So Joanne, I mean, how does the city behave like that, right? They're saying, we can't tell you something as simple as the breakdown between the original cost of the bill and the arrears. And they're saying, file an access to information to find out.
0 cents to me for what? Okay, a couple of things on this, but for that part of it, I'll start with that. Because it's the arrears of like a previous homeowner, they don't want to give the details of another person, but they want them to. But the city wants the current homeowner to pay the previous owner's bill. What? Taxes, property taxes, and water bills, and maybe other utilities are a little different than a car, for example, because the bill, the money owing stays with the property, right? It gets as opposed to the person. And I looked into this a bit. Believe me, I do not find the answers, because apparently there's no answers. But when you go to buy a new home, your lawyer or you would ask for a water certificate that shows, that has them do the reading on a certain day, the water reading, so okay, this water is what I used up, and that is the former water bill. But this idea that you are somehow responsible, whether it's taxes or water or whatever, for something that a previous owner did makes no sense. I don't want to know, like, there might be some technicalities why this is the case, or some provincial legislation, or some weird background story. Like, I don't actually think the city just made this up of their own accord. There's usually some reason, but that doesn't mean it's a good reason, and it doesn't mean that we should continue it. It clearly on its face makes 0 sense. Also, he bought this house in 2017, and he got the bill in March. What's been happening the last 8 years? Now, I talked to Arthur White-Crummey, who is the great reporter at CBC who did this story, asked if there's any updates. And he says, well, the city is denying that there was any kind of blitz, like they went through their arrears and thought, oh, who should we be, charging? But like, how do they not know anything about this? I mean, a Google Doc showed that the previous owner died in 2019, and the city didn't seem to know that. Like, that is not okay. And we're going to talk about the red light camera stuff again. Like, all of these are the things that make people distrust government, right? And they're small things. It's not like LRT fail, like that's a big thing. But these little tiny things are just like, they're bad. They're bad because it makes people think that the city doesn't know what it's doing or it doesn't care. And I don't think either of those things are true, but this is not a good look.
Well, you know what? Actually, so John, this reminds me of an article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago where I talked about my process of booking a room at a community center run by the city of Ottawa. It took me 18 days, 7 emails, 3 phone calls, and 1 visit to the community center to book that room, something which should have been done in a few keystrokes, right? And so when I heard this story, it really reminded me of that, of that process I went through, because it's, like this is a process that is not built around the customer, right? We would like to think that the city would be there to serve its customers, its clients, its residents, but it seems to be these processes are built exactly in the opposite direction, right? For whatever reason. I mean, John, do you have any insight into what's going on here?
Do I have the answer to all this? Well, look, Neil, I read your post, and I just was pulling out my hair, and I don't have a lot of hair to pull out anymore over what your experience was all about. Because just the bureaucracy involved in going back and forth with the city with different people seemed like just crazy. Now on the flip side, like I've had our families has had to book rooms or places at community centers for various things, and we haven't had the same experience as you. So it could be like, and this is maybe a criticism. It might be the experience with that facility, and so nothing's standardized, right? I understand when you have to, what the city has to perhaps vet who's renting the space, or else there's going to maybe other controversies that brew up depending upon who's renting the space.
Yeah.
But to take 18 days back and forth with different bureaucrats, and I think I read in your post, Neil, that they sent you information about how to pay online. You just couldn't pay right there, and that exchange was just maddening. But I mean, that process, I hope they fix, but it might speak to just a greater thing. Every so often, parents have to register their kids for swimming lessons a few times a year, and the stories about booking spaces and rec programs always bubble to the surface because of some kind of technology behind the scenes that isn't quite working the way that taxpayers want it to. So I wonder if that conversation, the one that you had with many bureaucrats, fits into the larger conversation about just booking and technology offerings by the city.
I would also like to say that in my experience of reporting on city staff, knowing city staff, including in my couple of years since leaving, reporting in my interactions with city staff, they would like to do a good job. Like, I don't think staff are like, oh, how are you going to screw around with taxpayers and freak them out? Well, maybe you, Neil. I don't know. I can't tell. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that, you've had old processes and it's very hard to say, okay, we're going to start everything from scratch, right? And that's kind of probably what you have to do is take a program, go to ground zero, rebuild it up. How does it work with modern technology and what we work? And I think that over time, different things have been tried. And so probably, as Jon says, there's different processes for different facilities. I mean, maybe they're going to look at this water bill issue now, because that's the first time I've ever heard of it. And people went, what? And so I hope that they will look at it and say, okay, this can't continue. We need a different process. And I think that's also what happens. It's, everyone's pretty overworked. And, nobody, it doesn't come to the top of people's list to say, well, actually, that's not true. I was going to say that to redo the services, but they did actually redo Service Ontario under Steve Kanellakis. Remember that, Jon?
Service
that was
Ottawa,
a huge deal. Service Ottawa, I apologize. And so they do give it a try, but it is a big organization and they can't think of every single thing. And I don't know, isn't AI supposed to fix all this? I thought that was cool.
You know what? My take on it is simply that these are processes that are not designed around the customer, and that's the problem, right? If you look at it from the customer's perspective and say, how do we make it as simple for the customer as possible? Like, imagine if we were a competitive business, right?
As opposed to the bureaucratic process, how does it fit into the bureaucratic city process?
Yeah.
What if it were just all customer oriented? Was that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, because I mean, I think there's an element of just covering their butts, right? And I say this as, former public servant, and I know how bureaucracies work, right? We're just it's all about minimizing risk. But okay. Anyways, I just want to shout out to the audience that I had a lot of feedback on that experience. And if you've had something similar, please share it with us. We'd love to hear about it. And actually, in all seriousness, because I think, Joanne, to your point, that until these sort of stories get heard in the news and someone at City Hall is a little bit embarrassed by them, nothing's going to change. So let's get them out in the open and see if we can go about fixing them.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. And let's move on to our third topic, which is we want to revisit the issue of traffic cameras. We want to revisit it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
We didn't spend enough time on it last
I'll
week.
tell you what. First of all, we got a ton of comments on it. People were really seized by this issue. And on top of that, it is going to full council on Wednesday. So by the time people are listening to this podcast, it might be as early as Tuesday, and it'll be coming up to City Council. But the third point that I want to raise is there were a couple of councillors that raised the red flag when this report first came out. And I would say that those councillors got a little bit scolded for reporting it in a way that the committee discussion said, well, you're not quite understanding it correctly. And in fact, if you had read between the lines, you would have seen what was actually happening. So those councillors got scolded. And I just want to say that I don't think it was fair that they got criticized the way they did. I'm grateful that they brought this to the attention of everybody.
Yeah, shout out to Lane Johnson, for example, college board.
Yeah, that's right.
He wrote, I thought, was a measured piece saying, I'm disappointed to see this and I don't know what's going on. I would have been more mad personally, but I thought, yeah, for sure. And they were right.
Okay. Well, why don't you talk about that, Joanne? Because was this essentially, on the one hand, we're hearing the city say, well, you just didn't read the documents properly. On the other hand, we talked about the actual language. We saw that ourselves last time we talked. and it was pretty clear that all revenue would go to road safety.
I'm going to say this, a couple of things. One, if counselors are confused, if people reading the stories are confused, if people, I'm going to throw us in, people who are City Hall watchers are confused, the media is confused, then it's not clear and it's not good, right? So you don't get to say they were supposed to somehow know magically what people were talking about. Also, when we dug down to it, and Jon did a great job explaining it last week, like there are $11 million at the very least that were supposed to go to traffic safety that they can't find. They don't know any, that the auditor cannot find any documentation for. So that is not on. I know Scott Moffat had a Facebook post, Neil, and you pointed that out to us, that said it was clear that all new net revenue was going to go
net new.
to this.
Yeah,
That's not clear. The motion literally says revenue. Everything ongoing from 2020 onward, every traffic camera kind of revenue was going to go towards road safety. Look, I don't have a problem that it's the net revenue. I mean, these cameras are expensive, and the fees that you raise through these cameras, sure, we should use that to pay for it, but that is not clear in the motion, in the documentation. It doesn't say how much that is going to be. Jon says he looked for the motion that the base 11.25 million was going to go into general coffers. He couldn't find it. Jon's very smart. I've known him a long time. Right? You can't just say, "Oh, everyone should have known." No, it's because no one can figure it out. So that's obviously not true. So it really distresses me, as we were talking, like the water bill, all these things, they just add to the distrust, or at least skepticism, that people have about the city. And if you want people to believe in government, to believe in our public institutions, then you have to write reports that are clear, and you have to give them information they can easily find. And this is not it.
Yeah,
that's my speech. That's my speech.
Okay.
Week 2 on traffic camera revenue.
Jon, is there anything more to say on traffic light cameras?
I would just like to put on the record, I hate the term net new. What the heck does that mean? Net new? Come on now. But just to jump off what Joanne was saying, it's something we talked about on the pod a few weeks ago. Clarity in the report writing, but clarity in the motion writing is really important too. And so I remember many counselors around that horseshoe over the years. I think of Peter Hume, is one, who reminded us that council speaks through motions. Council speaks through motions. That's their direction. There's the report, which is interesting for information, but the direction and the action is through the motion. So if your action is not clear, which we think it is, actually reading it, that it's clear to us, but it's being interpreted differently, it's just a reminder for everyone. And this is not just for council, but actually the bureaucrats too, right? Often they're the ones writing the motion and giving it to the councillor or mayor, whoever, to say, what do you think about this? Staff can support it. You can use this and put this on the table. So it's just a reminder for everyone, just to make sure they're very clear in their intentions with the motion and in the actual wording.
And to that point, I hope that at Wednesday's council meeting, we see a motion or direction to staff put forward to come back with a fuller, clearer, step-by-step report as to, what the decisions were by council, where that money went, because I think it is behooves everyone to just make this clear, because right now it is not.
Yeah. Well, we'll be watching the budget. We'll be watching the budget process to see. There were commitments made by the finance department to report on this more thoroughly, and so we'll be watching the budget process to see if that comes forward. And on that note,
I feel it should come forward earlier. I just want to say the budget process is in like the fall, and this is happening now. But I'm just saying.
Okay, you know what that means? It is time for the lightning round.
I was going to say cocktail hour, but okay, lightning round.
Okay, Joanne, let's start with you. It's been 1 year since Mayor Sutcliffe and Premier Ford signed the Ontario-Ottawa New Deal, which included uploading the Highway 147 from the city to the province. So that's the extension of the 417 out to Orleans. Now, we got a status update on what's happening a year later. So, Joanne, the original deal, it didn't talk about the amounts, but this update has said that there will be $56 million over 3 years in payments to the city. So my question to you, is this really an upload? Because upload is taking responsibility, right?
Sure.
Or is it just simply covering a set amount of costs? Over to you.
Well, it remains to be seen, but the intent of the province is to take over the operating and maintenance of that highway like it does the 417, like a 400 series highway. Originally, we were told the uploading would take till about 2026. And, there's a lot of studies to do as well. Like, we're still building the LRT out to the east end. And it is a little bit weird that the province is going to own a highway that has city infrastructure on it. Of course, the province has kind of mentioned in passing in the election that they were also going to upload the LRT. We'll see if that happens. But what we found out now is that it's going to take longer to upload it. So the city has already signed on the dotted line for this $56 million over 3 years. So that's good. We're going to get money to upload it. In the meantime, MTO is going to do their due diligence and put forward the conditions to upload it and take over the responsibility and maintenance. So right now, yes, we're just getting money to maintain it. I'll take that. And but the long-term goal is still at this moment for true uploading.
Okay, just in on time. Thanks, John. John, the Royal Ottawa Hospital. This was in the news a couple of weeks ago. The Royal Ottawa Hospital and the Matthew Perry Foundation are planning to build a Matthew Perry House on the grounds of the Royal Ottawa. Now, the facility would be an addiction recovery treatment center, and it would have about 160 patients at any one time. So this came into the news because a neighborhood group called the Common Sense Planning Coalition, so they opposed the project. So the neighborhood group says that this is about smart, sustainable, and responsible planning. Is that what it is, or is this just plain old NIMBYism?
Well, according to their website, and I quote, "This is not a case of NIMBYism." So that's on the record. Well, look, obviously they've got some, I would say, money behind them. I opened up my Kitchissippi Times last week, and I found a full-page ad from that coalition talking about this project and their opposition to it. I get what the concern is by some of these property owners. You got a nice piece of green space near you. It's there. There's other parks in the area that they could use, but they have this one that they've been liking for some years now. However, it is the Royals' land. It's an institutional piece of land, and so I always tell people to always keep in mind the land around you and what it's zoned, because you don't know what's going to go there one day. And for this community, that's what's happening. There's a development being proposed. Now, I don't know if there's going to be unnecessary land use adjustments. I don't know. But for this group, it's going to be an uphill battle. I don't look at my sense, guys. There's not a huge wave of opposition here. So I think this is going to go ahead. That's just my thought.
Okay.
I just want to correct it quickly because I'm a little bit involved in this project. Not a huge correction. It's actually for people who have already gone through addictions recovery, or who have already gone through treatment, and they need supportive. People suffering with addictions need supportive housing.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so just a little thing. This is why I didn't get to talk about it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. That is it for this week. So we are going to be back in 2 weeks. Next week is Victoria Day weekend, and we are taking a break. And in 2 weeks' time, we will be back. Not on the Monday, but on the Tuesday night. And we will be not on video, but in person. So just a reminder, anyone that would like to come and see the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel in action, you can see us on Tuesday, the 27th of May in the evening in downtown Ottawa. And if you want to join us, you can get tickets at betterottawa.ca/summit. So that's betterottawa.ca/summit. And I have to tell you, tickets are going quickly. We're about 75% sold out now. So we're very happy. We're looking forward to the event, and we hope you can join us. Just before we leave, I want to ask the two of you: are there any issues that you can see on the horizon that you think we might be talking about in 2 weeks? There was the provincial government was talking about housing this morning. Yeah,
I was thinking I watched it this morning. Development charges, always an exciting thing. And, cutting red tape. And it is yet another bill by the provincial government to streamline the process for building and maybe make it easier to do so. At first glance, for me, it looks very GTA centered, but we'll see if that has any implications for Ottawa. And so I hope we can talk about that in the next few weeks.
Okay, John, was there anything else that caught your eye, or is that?
Well, I see some councillors are starting to think about patio fees. We have a nice, beautiful day here on Monday, and I saw in the news that some councillors were questioning the cost of patio fees. That is the amount of money that businesses have to pay to set up patios on city-owned land right away. Yeah. And so we're going to see that debate, I would say, come back to City Hall in
every year
this week.
Every single year.
Around this time every year.
Yeah. Well, and of course, those were waived during the pandemic, right? Or after. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so bringing them back is a tough one.
I would like to say that we were going to have a new planning GM by our in-person life meeting, but I am hearing that it's not she will not be announced till the beginning of June. So this just continues on. The drama and the mystery lingers.
Well, hopefully early June. Thank you for that update, Joanne.
There you go.
I would like to thank all of you for joining us. I'd like to thank Jon and Joanne. And we will look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. Until then, have a great day.